computers. Today's webinar is the vendor problem and how attackers can get in through software and partners. This is pertaining to any business that has a vendor, or usually businesses have vendors, important software partners that they use, and all of those different vendors, partners that you use could be a vulnerability to your business as well. And this webinar is going to dig into that and kind of explain the situation and how you can better prepare yourself and your business for a situation like this. So attackers, they don't always break into your business. Sometimes they can walk in through someone that you trust. So third-party risk is the fastest growing attack vector. Your security is only as strong as the weakest link in your vendor chain, and you may not know what that link is. The critical thing here is your business can be as secure as possible, but you can still be vulnerable if one of your vendors becomes compromised. So it's critical that not only are you protecting your business, but you are asking your vendors how secure they are. So 62% of breaches involve a third-party vendor. 98% of organizations connected to a breached vendor. So usually most organizations, almost all organizations, have a connection to a vendor that's already been breached in the past. And then $4.5 million is the average cost of a supply chain breach. So what we're covering today is what supply chain attacks are, the real examples and how they work, how to reduce your business's exposure. So your vendor is the unlocked backdoor. Attackers compromise a vendor that you trust, then use that trusted relationship to walk straight into your systems. There's no hacking required. So whether it's a supply chain attack, a tool that you use gets compromised at the source, and then every customer who updates it installs that malware version automatically. For instance, SolarWinds, they had 18,000 organizations were infected with one update. So SolarWinds is a software package that a lot of businesses, a lot of IT businesses use. And they had an update go out, and like it says, 18,000 organizations install that update, like we're always told to do. And that update had the infection that compromised the 18,000 organizations. Another vector could be managed service provider. So your IT company. IT companies, they have the keys to the kingdom in most cases. So if an IT provider gets compromised, that could open the doors to all of their clients. So an MSP attack gives access to every client at one time. And, it's critical here that most MSPs, if they're taking security seriously, they will have multiple levels of security in place that should help mitigate the possibility that they become compromised. And then another vector, another attack surface could be data transfer tools. MoveIt, which is a common one, had 2,600 plus organizations breached via one file transfer tool. So their file transfer tool got compromised, and then over 2,600 organizations became compromised because of that tool. So think about the different tools that you use, whether you're a financial institution using Intuit or some other financial software, or, you're some other organization using a critical piece of software for your business. That is an attack surface for your business. These weren't hacks. They were just trusted access turned against you. So these attacks don't require sophisticated hacking. They exploit the trust and access that you've already granted. Excuse me. So the SolarWinds, that happened back in 2020. It's an IT monitoring software tool, and malicious updates were pushed out to over 18,000 customers. Attackers inside networks for months before detection. So the whole process, the whole compromise happened months prior to when it was finally detected. And this included government entities, Fortune 500 companies, and defense contractors. So SolarWinds was a very huge part of a lot of critical infrastructure. So the fact that it got compromised was a big problem. And then MoveIt, that happened back in 2023. It's file transfer software. So a zero-day exploit gave attackers access to files being transferred, and there was no user interaction required. So a zero-day exploit means a critical flaw was found in the software that gained access to the criminal. The criminals could gain access to that software without any problems. So what ended up happening is attackers were able to intercept and see files that were being transferred without the user having to allow it, so it was a huge compromise there. So it was 2,600 plus organizations, and there were over 77 million individuals affected. So that was a lot of files, a lot of accounts, a lot of organizations that were affected just in one breach. And then Change Healthcare, that happened back in 2024. They are a healthcare payments vendor. So they were attacked with ransomware on one of the vendors, and it shut down payments to over 900,000 pharmacies and providers for weeks. So I remember when this happened, pretty much like the doctor's offices, hospitals, they couldn't process payments. And what ended up happening, it was a $22 billion plus impact, and it affected virtually every U.S. pharmacy. So that was, think about it. So for weeks, pharmacies couldn't process payments. That's a huge problem. So how you can reduce your risk, you can't control your vendors, but you can control your risk. So you can't stop a vendor from being breached, but you can limit how much damage that breach does to your business. So you do 4 controls: least privilege access. So vendors only get access to the systems that they need, nothing more. And then you review and revoke when contracts end. So this limits the blast radius if a vendor is compromised. So, knowing what your vendors have access to at any point and revoking those permissions when necessary helps limit how exposed your business is. Network segmentation. Vendor access should be isolated from your core systems. A breach in one area doesn't spread everywhere. So this contains the damage to one segment of the network. So think about it in the grand scheme of a business. You've got the HR department, the IT department, maybe you've got a project management department. If each department has a network segmentation, if one of the employees in those departments gets compromised, it's not going to spread to the entire network. It may spread to the entire segment, but that is much better and manageable than it spreading to the entire company. Vendor security vetting. So ask your vendors, do you carry cyber insurance? Have you ever had a breach? And what's your multi-factor authentication policy? So this is going to filter out the weakest links before you connect. Again, this is you getting to know your vendors and how serious they take security, so that either do you want to do business with them or find a different vendor, or how can you limit their exposure in your business the most, so that they don't have a lot of access. And then monitor vendor access actively. So know who has access, when they access it, and flag anything unusual. Logs are your early warning sign. So it'll help detect compromises before it spreads to you. And, this is monitoring and logging is only as useful as those who are reviewing it. You can have all the logging in place, you can have all the monitoring in place, but if no one's actively monitoring or reviewing those logs, it's not doing any good. So you definitely have to make sure that you're doing the monitoring, but then someone is actively reviewing that. So the question isn't whether your vendors will be breached, it's how much of that breach will reach you. The reality check of it, how exposed are you through your vendors right now? Can you list every vendor, software tool, or third party that has access to your systems or data? So it's important to know who has access to your systems at this point. Do your vendors have access to one of your systems, or to more of your systems than they actually need? So again, if you're giving a vendor full access to your network, but they only need access to a certain portion of it, it's important to limit how much access they have in your network. Because if something happens to them, it's going to limit how vulnerable you are from their breach. Have you ever asked a vendor about their cybersecurity practices, insurance, or breach history? So this helps you get to know how seriously they take security, whether they've had incidences in the past, and whether if they have cyber insurance. Because if they don't have cyber insurance and they suffer a breach that affects you, you may be limited in how much you're going to be able to recover financially from this breach. Think about it in the sense of getting into an accident with an uninsured motorist. Your insurance has to kick in, but it's only going to be limited to a certain amount. Cyber insurance, same thing. When there's a breach or an incident, if the company that you're working with doesn't have cyber insurance, it's going to be hard to get a payout or help with damages. If a vendor if a vendor that you use was breached tonight, would you know, and would you know how to respond? So again, if a third-party vendor that you use was breached, would you know? Would they communicate to all their vendors that they use, you included, that they suffered a breach? And if so, if they did say, hey, we had a breach, somebody accessed our systems that shouldn't have, how would you respond? What would you do? It's important to have this information ready, and that's, it goes on there to say about an incident response plan. So an incident response plan is not only for when your business directly suffers a breach, but it can also or should also include when a vendor suffers a breach. So with all that said, one thing that we do offer is a free 30-minute business risk review call. On this call, we ask a series of questions to gauge what you know about your systems, your vendors, and then if you know a lot about what you've got in place, it'll help us uncover any possible gaps. And then at the end of our risk review calls, we will provide a summary of the call and all the questions and the answers. And then at the end of that summary, we will include actionable items. So, if we found gaps along the way, we will provide the steps or the baseline on how to resolve those steps. And whether you use an IT provider already, or you want to try tackling the resolutions yourself, or, we offer that service as well. So it's a free 30-minute, no obligation call. And, you gain a lot of information about your business and your knowledge. And then what you do with that information is entirely up to you. We're not here to replace IT providers. We're not here to push sales and try to, become a client, or you become a client of ours. We're just here to help businesses understand their risk and know where they stand. So if you're interested in setting up your own business risk review, go to businessrisk.b&rcomputers.com. It's there on the screen, and you can select your date and time, and then we'll get a notification of that review call. If you have any other questions or comments or concerns, feel free to comment on this video, give us a call. We're here to help, here to answer questions. We like to help people. With that said, I appreciate your time watching this webinar today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.